அனைவருக்கும் என்னுடைய பணிவான வணக்கம். அழைப்பு விடுத்து வரவழைத்து என்னுடைய ஆராய்ச்சியை பகிர்ந்து கொள்ள வாய்ப்பளித்த ரோஜா முத்தையா ஆய்வு நூலகத்துக்கும் ஒன்மை ஃபவுண்டேஷனுக்கும் என்னுடைய மனமார்ந்த நன்றி. இதை பொறுப்பெடுத்து வெற்றிகரமாக நடத்தி வரும் அனைவருக்கும், குறிப்பாக சுப்பு அவர்களுக்கும் சத்யா அவர்களுக்கும் என்னுடைய வாழ்த்துக்கள். பொதுவாக மேடையில் நான் தமிழில் பேசினது கிடையாது, அந்த வாய்ப்பும் இருந்ததில்லை, பேசவும் வராது, அது வேறு விஷயம். தமிழில் சாதாரணமாக பேசிடலாம், ஆனால் மேடையில் பேசுகிறதுன்றது ஒரு தனிக்கலை. அது என்னை பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் அப்படி தான். அது எனக்கு பழக்கம் இல்லாதது ஒன்று. கல்லூரிகளிலும் மற்ற இடங்களிலையும் ஆங்கிலத்திலேயே பேசி பழக்கப்பட்டதுனால திடீர்னு தமிழில் பேசுகிறது யோசிக்க வேண்டியதாக இருக்கிறது. நேற்று விழாவில் சுந்தர் சார், அப்புறம் விக்னேஷ் அவர்கள், அப்புறம் கிருஷ்ணபிரியா அவர்கள் ரொம்ப அழகாக தெளிவாக பயனுள்ளதாக பேசினாங்க. அதை கேட்டதுக்கு பிறகு எனக்கே யோசனை வந்தது, என்ன பண்ண போகிறோம், இப்போ ஒன்றுமே ப்ரிப்பேர் பண்ணலையே, என்ன பேச போகிறோன்னு தயக்கமாக இருந்தது. நல்ல வேலையாக என்னுடைய பிஹெச்டியிலேருந்து ஒரு பகுதியை தான் நான் இப்போ பேச போகிறேன். அது ஒரு பயனுள்ளதாக இருக்கும்னு நான் கருதுகிறேன். ஸோ ஆராய்ச்சி தமிழில் இருந்தாலும் ஆங்கிலத்தில் தான் நான் உரை நடத்த போகிறேன், அதனால் என்னை மன்னிக்கவும். ஸோ வித் தட் yeah, so this is just a part of my PhD research, one aspect of it. So I did my PhD under my guru, Professor G.V. Srikumar. He's also here. He's going to speak after me. So it's a pleasure to be with him and to be guided under him. And he was also a mentor, father figure and everything for me. And there was also another faculty, Professor Udayakumar from Industrial Design Center, IIT Bombay, where I did my PhD. So they both were my supervisors and mentored the PhD. And also my doctoral committee, I'm thankful to them for all their inputs. With that, I was able to kind of complete my PhD. And this is just one aspect of PhD that I'm going to share with you. So just to give you an idea, so my PhD was on Tamil typography. So the title is like Transformation of Tamil Letterforms from early palm leaf manuscripts to early letterpress printing. So I was trying to analyze how letterforms have transformed from handwritten script in palm leaf to letterpress, where it got standardized that we see today. Yeah? So that was my research. As a part of that, I also tried to understand the early typefaces which were there during the printing era, and then analyze the typefaces and also the printing faces, and then try to see how the handwritten form kind of converged or transformed into a standardized form. So here I am only going to talk about just the print aspect of it. Again, it's just like small portion. Yeah. So thank you. So let me also upfront tell you that this research is mostly based on lots of people who have already done a great amount of study on Indian printing. So what I have done is just like put them together, trying to kind of give it a structure from my own perspective or understanding of how printing has evolved in especially from Tamil script perspective. Yeah. So it's not that I have come up with something new altogether, but it's just that compilation of all these great peoples like A.K. Pirolkar, B.S. Kesavan, Sambandham. So all of those people have done a tremendous amount of research. So if you are very much interested in printing and typography and graphic design, at least from the Indian context, I think you need to read these books written by these people. And so all my resources and sources are based on from their work. Yeah. So mobile type. So I've also structured. So I also had an opportunity to present this in an international conference in Cyprus. Yeah. So I've just modified and customized to this present audience. And so if you look at printing, so in general, so Gutenberg is attributed for development of printing, though it was earlier been already in practice in Southeast Asian countries like Korea and China. But he is often credited as the inventor of the mobile type printing. So it started in 1455, and within a 100 years span of time, it reached India. Yeah. So unlike many other countries around the world. Yeah. So that's the beauty, and you will be surprised to see a lot of things Like I already mentioned, so my research is a synthesis of already existing literature based on those great people who have already done that. Yeah, so so it will also going to be purely visual. So yeah, so briefly about Tamil. So as you all know, so I will not go deeper into this thing. And so some examples of from the Archaeological Survey of India. So how the letter forms look like in stone inscriptions. So this is a chart by Airavada Mahadevan. I think you can see his statue here. So I also spent some time here in the Roja Muthiah Library for my research. So I collected a lot of information and understood the evolution of Tamil script, how it has evolved. And so this is a chart which was all was presented in the book from the research from Airavada Mahadevan. So it's in 7th century AD, Tamil kind of emerged from the combinations of Vattaruthu and Grantha script. Yeah, so it has a lot of historicity. So these are the letter forms which you often see. So I'll move on. So primarily how printing came in, it started with the discovery of Vasco da Gama's sea route. Yeah, so that kind of paved a way for things to move in from Europe to India. Yeah, so the first thing the missionaries tried to do was that try to adapt the local languages, which was there in Tamil. So, and then try to kind of preach their own religious scriptures. So that was the starting point. And in order to do that, so they had to kind of learn the local language, the native language that was there. And so at that point of time, palm leaf manuscripts were prevalent in terms of the written communication is concerned. So they also have to practice so that they can communicate in the same format. So it became a little difficult, though some of the scholars really learned, spent a lot of time and years being here in our own country and learned it and trying to do their best to kind of communicate their religion. So I'm sorry, the sources are all very blurred. So this is a manuscript from Government Oriental Manuscripts Library from Madras University. They have a huge collection of manuscripts, not just in Tamil, from all across the Indian states. Yeah, so they have in Malayalam, Kannada, Telugu, and all. So if you are keen in doing a research, I think you need to visit that library, which has a huge repository of golden informations. Yeah, so this I gathered a lot of manuscripts and tried to kind of look at the letter forms in these manuscripts. Yeah. So one of the first printing actually in Tamil happened even before in India itself. So it happened in Lisbon, the capital of Portugal. Yeah. So many of the typefaces, the manuscripts were actually taken from here and taken there, and types were cast based on the inspiration of the palm leaf manuscripts which was taken there, and then using those types printing had happened. Yeah, so in 1554 the first Tamil book, the Cartilla Lingua Tamil, though I cannot pronounce it properly, so Luso Catechism was printed in Lisbon. Yeah, so this was one of the first printed book, and the interesting thing about this book is that it's in bilingual, so it's both in Portuguese as well as in Tamil, and they also did a nice color combinations to distinguish both the scripts. Yeah, so which was one of the interesting features of the book. Yeah, and so this became the first Indian language book in India itself. So this was one of the first book to be printed in a foreign soil. Yeah, so and the first printing press also came here to India by accident. It was supposed to go to Ethiopia, a place called Abyssinia. So since there was a political turmoil there, so it kind of accidentally landed in Goa, and it just remained there for a long time because there was no people to kind of operate the press. Yeah, so they did not have an expertise to kind of operate the press. So the first printing was done. It's this book called Doctrina Christum. So after that, slowly printing emerged from there, Goa to various other places. Yeah, that's also because of the expansion of the Portuguese. Yeah, so they also kind of settled in different places and slowly coming in. So the first press was in Goa, and then if you look at in the further southern part, then in Kollam they started in 1578 and 1579. So how do we know all of those things? That's because one, there is a references to them, and there are also print samples which were printed from these presses. Yeah, so you will get to see some of the examples of them. And so in Punekel, so you have in 1586. And that is also a landmark press. I'll just tell you why it is. Yeah. So there is a father called Henriques. He is considered to be the father of Indian printing because he was one of the first person to kind of get the printing started. Yeah. So he printed this Doctrina Christium, which I've already told. He printed in Goa, and later he moved on to Punaikal. Yeah. So, and then he kind of settled there, and he also passed away from that same place. Yeah. So you'll still find a placard there about him. And you also find a museum there which they have very nicely preserved. Yeah, so you could see the presses and how the machines that he has used. And then, so there are only few, the samples of those things are not there, but the same edition was printed in 1578 in Kollam. Yeah, and so the samples of that book is here. I think yesterday also, I think Professor Tariq kind of showed some samples of the pages. Yeah, of the first printed book. So if you can clearly notice on the right side, you will find that, so it is, the letter forms are almost similar to the palm leaf manuscripts which exist at that point of time. Yeah. So if you look at the letter T and all, it has a varying width. Yeah. So it also is very extended, unlike the way how we see right now, letter T. Yeah. So there are a lot of similarities. So that's why we understand that the inspirations for most of the early letterpress printing comes from the palm leaf manuscripts, and it is also the case for even stone inscriptions. Yeah. So all the culvert that you see around. So before they do it, they write it on a smaller medium, which is the manuscript itself, and then they try to copy and imitate it onto the stone. Yeah. So and that's why we kind of correlate that the manuscript letter form is actually being translated on or transformed onto the stone itself. The same thing has also happened in terms of the printing as well. So the letter forms which were in manuscripts were copied onto the printing as well. So type were casted based on that. Yeah, he also further continued printing a lot more books. So it was all basically a translation of, again, Christian literature. So at this point of time, you did not find any Tamil literature or local native literary materials being printed. It's most often it is to do with the Christian literature and also with respect to Bible and so on. So they wanted to kind of communicate. So in 1580, so Henriques printed another title book, which is also a very large volume of book. Again, only the first 2 pages are available. You don't find the entire book, and this is a larger volume as compared to all the other books, yeah, which has very less number of pages. Yeah. So let me also remind you, unlike today that we see there are so many books, books are so a rare commodity. Yeah. It's like very few people can afford to have a book. So unlike how we see today, where generally we see books everywhere, no printed materials. So these are all something which is like very exclusive in nature and which is not so easily accessible to a common public. Yeah. So that's why even few pages printed becomes so valuable and precious to look at. Yeah. And so the Flow Sanctum is another book which was printed by, again, Henriques in 1586. So this was printed in Punaikal and with the same typefaces used in Kollam. Yeah. So they also kind of shared typefaces from one press to another instead of casting. Yeah. So you should also note that there was no printing press or type foundries in India. So they used to cast the types from Europe and then bring it to India, and then in India they used to print. Yeah. So they did not have the facilities to kind of cast typefaces in India itself. Yeah. At least at that point of time. So these are some of the pages of Confasiero. Yeah. So they also had people who could cut type. Yeah. So this is a timeline which kind of briefly tells about how it actually printing began in India. Yeah. So after 1600s, there was not much of an activities in terms of printing is concerned. So you had a big vacuum there, where a big gap. Yeah. So there are various reasons stated for the gap. Yeah. So one is that the Portuguese kind of officially withdrew the support for the Indian languages. So they said that we would want to kind of communicate in Portuguese itself. They wanted the natives to kind of learn Portuguese and kind of start understanding what it is and learn the content. Yeah. So that was one of the reasons, and also there were a lot of political situations which also happened during the same point of time. Yeah. So you could also see the rise of the Danish missionaries as well as the British rule. Yeah. So later on, so that's why the Portuguese kind of had a setback and they could not publish and print so much. But there was one exemption that in Ambalkad in 1675, you kind of find an example where Tamil Portuguese dictionary, so it is considered one of the first dictionaries to be printed, yeah, to translate Tamil to Portuguese, and so to ensure that the people also kind of understand what the Portuguese language. Yeah. So that was one, and then later on, like I mentioned, so because of the political change in the Indian scenario, so where the Danish missionaries came in and they kind of started to establish centers in different parts of the southern India, and simultaneously you also see the British rule slowly making progresses, especially the British East India Company. Yeah, and then they also, the rule is they also started to kind of have their own press in different places in Madras, Colombo, Calcutta. So British also started a press in the Colombo and Calcutta and Bombay. Yeah. So William Carey is another person who established press in Serampur in Calcutta, and likewise in Bombay. So you'll find some of these presses still being there, which is operational. Yeah. So another landmark event in terms of Tamil printing is concerned is the Tarangambadi press, yeah, which started in 1730. That is a landmark press primarily because it just operated for another century, continued to be active, and they also published a lot more books and various other publications. Yeah. And this was by Bartholomew Zegenbal. He is also another very important figure that one has to understand and remember, learn about. Yeah, so he was another pioneer who really spearheaded the printing in India, yeah, especially in Tamil. Yeah, so he also settled there in Tarangambadi, and you will also find his cemetery there, yeah, in the church. So he's been credited for various things. One of the things that he established the paper mill, because to print you also need a substrate. Yeah? So you need a paper for printing process. Yeah? So again, all of those things were not available at that point of time. Yeah, so he started the paper mill in Porayar, and then he also started the type foundries. So these are one of the first in our country. Yeah? Unlike many other states where printing was unheard of. Yeah? So Tamil was one of the first language, yeah, where printing happened. And so that is the history of Tamil printing. So in 1715, like I said, paper mill was established and printing press was also established. A type foundry was established by him. And he also continued to print a lot more works in Tamil. Yeah, so this is an example of his work. And you will also find interesting thing is that unlike the earlier one, if you observe closely, if you are into typography and communication design, so you will have, you could see there is a headline, there is a different type sizes that is being used, which has to be casted in differently. Yeah, so unlike the digital medium where you can use the same typeface and you can change the size in real time, right? So through any of the softwares. But here in a letterpress, every size has to be casted separately. So you have this title, and you also kind of have some kind of a subheading, and then you have a body text, and so very nicely central lined. So this is, you can also see parallels to that in typography, which was happening in the West. Yeah. So left align, forced justification in terms of alignment, those that we see today were not there at the time. So most of the texts are composed central lined. Yeah. So in terms of symmetry is concerned, so that creates a beautiful composition. So this also follows the same kind of in Western typography where you have a central alignment there for the cover title and also hierarchy in terms of information is concerned. Yeah, so let me mostly focus on the type aspect of it. So again, these are types which are inspired from palm leaf manuscripts, again letterpress palm leaf manuscripts that were existing that time. Yeah. So here you can see the press continued for more than 100 years. It survived and did a lot of publications. So then press also came to Madras, which the British again began to kind of have control of the southern part, especially in Chennai and so on. And so they defeated the French. Yeah? So French was earlier was there in in Tamil Nadu, but now they moved on to Portuguese. They were limited to only, sorry, not limited to only Pondicherry, yeah, so unlike the rest of the area. So once they defeated, so they were confined to only Pondicherry, but the British had control of rest of the parts of the Tamil Nadu. And this also kind of affected the printing in Sri Lanka as well. So one of the press they confiscated and they kind of established in Veperi, and they also found the right people to kind of operate. And then from then on, you will get to kind of see a lot of presses which has been functioning. Yeah. So the Veperi press is still operational. It's called the government press. So a lot of major printing happens there, both in the earlier times, even today. Yeah. And so one of the important notable printed work is the Malabar New Testament, yeah, and also the Tamil English Dictionary. Yeah. So here, this is where we see the decline of the Portuguese control of the southern India, and also their activities in terms of printing and type. Yeah. So this is to further show you how actually printing has evolved in the southern India. So after this, there were a lot more other presses, which again, because of the British rule, so they were also in Bengal, so they had a major control in Bengal as well, and partly they also took over Mumbai, Delhi, and various other places. Yeah. So these are again examples of various other printing presses which are established in different timelines. So in Tanjavur also we had a press in 1809, and so on. Yeah. So there are various resources which will kind of mention these years, maybe a year before or after, but to my knowledge, I try to kind of verify, cross-verify, then try to identify the exact specific year in which the press is actually established in different places. Yeah, especially my sources comes from Professor B.S. Kesavan's material, research material. Yeah. So what I did is, so this is kind of my contribution. If you get an opportunity to read the thesis, this is what I kind of concluded. So there were different phases in which Tamil printing can be kind of classified. Yeah. So one is the early phase, which is mostly predominantly done by the Portuguese missionaries, and then you have the gap, and then you have the Danish missionaries who had a large amount of control on the print and print media, and then later on British kind of started the presses, yeah, across the country, yeah, not just within the southern part, but across the Indian country, yeah. And so after 1800, if you ask me, so that's when actually even the native people started to kind of have their own presses, yeah. So people from India, they kind of established presses, and that's when even Tamil languages, literary works started to kind of get printed, yeah. So until then, it's mostly about either it's a dictionary or it's to do with the Christian literature, yeah. So only after 1820s onwards, you will find a lot more local native people starting presses on their own, and also printing like Tirukural and various other great literary works in Tamil. Yeah. So this is the brief history of Tamil printing to say, and yeah. So this is how various Indian scripts, where the first time the script got printed. Yeah. So you can see Tamil as like a way older than many of the Indian scripts if you make a comparison of it. Yeah. So so that's the beauty of the language, and how it actually made a big progress in terms of printing is concerned. Yeah. So and yesterday Vignesh had talked about digital objects and various things, and I think probably the new thing is that we're getting into a digital space. So we also have a panel discussion in the evening. We will be talking about importance of Tamil typography, typeface design, and so on. Yeah. So probably I'll stop here. Yeah. So I would look forward, since the time is almost there, so I would like to take questions rather than continuing. Yeah. So some of my resources. Yeah. So the first book is a very important book in terms of typography by Baparao Naik. Yeah, it's Typography of Devanagari. It's a 3-volume book. It also has a lot of specimens of early printing, not just in Tamil, of course, in various other Indian languages. It also talks about different mediums that were used for written communication across the country. Yeah, so like Bridge Bark, and palm leaf manuscripts and various other natural materials people used to write in different parts of the country. And so it's a very good reference material. So I could see some of the students, if you are keen in kind of pursuing research or even in graphic design, this could be some of the useful information resources for you to look at. Yeah. So there were so many, so I've just put very selected few of them. And Achum Padipum by MS Sambandham is another iconic book. It also actually won the Government of Tamil Nadu award, yeah, for the best book. Yeah. So I don't exactly remember the title of the award, but yeah. So it was another major resource for me also to kind of understand the various presses across the country, and especially from Tamil script. Yeah. So that's another great book. Yeah. So it doesn't cost you much, but yeah, reading it was like a pleasure for me, and that actually moved my research ahead. Yeah. So I was kind of stuck to kind of look out for resources for my own research. I could not find not many materials. Then this book kind of changed everything, and then I could kind of make a good progress in my PhD. Yeah, so those books, and of course there were a lot of other resource materials which really helped me progress my research and complete my PhD. Yeah. So yeah, so that is it. So thank you. So I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you, sir. Tamil typography oda வரலாறு குறித்து அது ரொம்ப பெருசு. அதை எந்த அளவுக்கு நமக்கு சுவாரஸ்யமாக சொல்ல முடியுமோ அந்த அளவுக்கு சுவாரஸ்யமாகவும் ரொம்ப முக்கியமான, குறிப்பாக பொறையாறில் அவர் சொன்ன விஷயம் ரொம்ப முக்கியமானது. முத இந்தியாவிலேயே தமிழ் மொழிக்கு தான் அந்த அச்சுருக்களை தயாரிக்கிற ஒரு டைப் ஃபவுண்டரி உருவாக்குனாங்க. அது ரொம்ப முக்கியமான, அந்தளவுக்கு ஒரு முக்கியமான மொழி நம்மளோட மொழி. நமக்கு இன்னும் 10 நிமிஷம் இருக்குது. முக்கியமான சில கேள்விகள் சார்கிட்ட கேட்கலாம்.
சார், இப்போ தமிழ் லெட்டருடைய ஆரிஜின் நம்ம சாயல் தானே, சவுத்து தமிழ்நாடு தானே அதனுடைய ஆரிஜின். அந்த கிராஃபிக்கல் ஃபார்ம் இங்கிருந்து தானே வருது. ஆனால் நீங்கள் வேறு வேர்ல்டு மேப் போட்டு அதில் வேறு எங்கேருந்தோ வர்ற மாதிரி யூரோப்பியன் சைட்லேருந்து அந்த மாடல் லெட்டர்ஸ் அது வர்ற மாதிரி அது இங்கே அதே இவால்வ் ஆயிடுச்சு தமிழ் லெட்டரா, இது இப்போ வேறு வடிவத்தை பெற்றதுன்றீங்க?
இல்லை அப்படி நான் சொல்ல வரல.
இல்லையா, அது எக்ஸாக்ட் கிளாரிஃபிகேஷன் வேணும்.
ஓகே,
அது எப்படி ஆரிஜின், அது இந்த லெட்டருடைய ஆரிஜின் இனிஷியல் ஃபார்ம் அது ஒன்லி இங்கிருந்து தானே அது இவால்வ் ஆகிருக்கும்? அதுதான் என்னுடைய கேள்வி.
ஆமாம், கண்டிப்பாக டெஃபினட்டாக அது தமிழ்நாட்டிலேருந்து தான் ஆரிஜினேஷன். பட் நான் சொல்ல வந்தது என்னென்னா, ப்ரெஸ் பிரிண்டிங்கில் தமிழ் டைப் காஸ்ட் பண்ணுறது ஃபஸ்ட்டு லிஸ்பனில் தான் நடந்தது. பிரிண்டிங்கும் லிஸ்பனில் தான் நடந்தது. இந்த பிரிண்டிங் தான் நடந்தது ஒழிய தமிழ் ஸ்கிரிப்ட் அங்கேருந்து எவால்வ் ஆனதுன்னு நான் சொல்ல வரல. இட்ஸ் ஜஸ்ட் த ஃபர்ஸ்ட் டைம் பிரிண்டிங் ஹேப்பன்ட் இன் லிஸ்பன் அண்ட் த டைப்ஸ் வேர் காஸ்டட் தேர் அண்ட் தட் வாஸ் டிரான்ஸ்போர்ட்டட் ஹியர் இன் இந்தியா அண்ட் இட் வாஸ் ஃபர்தர் யூஸ்ட் ஃபார் பிரிண்டிங் பர்பஸஸ். ஸோ அவ்வளோதான். ஸோ ஆரிஜினேஷன் ஆஃப் ஸ்கிரிப்ட் எவ்ரி திங் எல்லாமே இங்கே தமிழ்நாட்டில் தான். ஸோ அதில் ஒரு சந்தேகமும் இல்லை. அதில் ஆஃப்கோர்ஸ் நிறைய பேர் எழுதிருக்காங்க. அதெல்லாம் நான் சொல்ல வந்தேன்னா அவ்வளோதான், பெரிய சிக்கல் அது. ஸோ ஆமாம்.
நெக்ஸ்ட் கொஸ்டின். பின்னாடி ஒரு
ஹலோ.
Yeah, hi.
So continuing to the previous question which he asked, இப்போ evolution of typeல இந்த print role play பண்ணிருக்கேன்னு நினைக்கிறீங்களா?
Yes, of course. Yeah, print has played an immense role in terms of standardizing the letter forms. Yeah. So you kind of see variations in the palm leaf manuscripts. இப்போ நான் palm leafல எழுதுனேன்னா ஒரு மாதிரி, இட்ஸ் ஜஸ்ட் லைக் அவர் ஓன் ஹேண்ட் ரைட்டிங்க. ஒவ்வொரு ஹேண்ட் ரைட்டிங்கும் வேறு விதமாக இருக்கு இல்லைங்களா? நீங்கள் எழுதுனீங்கன்னா டிஃப்ரெண்ட்டாக எழுதுவீங்க, நான் எழுதுனா டிஃப்ரெண்ட்டாக எழுதுனேன். ஸோ palm leaf manuscripts பேசிக்கலி ஒரு இண்டிவிஜுவலோடைய ஸ்க்ரைப் இல்லை. ஸோ ஆஸ் எ ஸ்க்ரைப் ஐ கைண்ட் ஆஃப் ரைட் ஆன் த manuscripts, ஒரு ஹேண்ட் ரைட்டிங்னு சொல்லலாம் இல்லைங்களா? ஸோ தேர் ஆல் வேரியேஷன்ஸ். ஸோ தேர் நாட் ஒன் ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் ஃபார்ம் தட் வி சி. இப்போ நம்ம அஃப்கோர்ஸ் வி ஹேவ் டிஃப்ரெண்ட் டைப்ஃபேஸஸ், அது வேறு. பட் ஒரு ஸ்டாண்டர்ட் ஸ்கெலிட்டல் ஸ்ட்ரக்சர் we already established இப்போ. ஸோ இப்போ நீங்கள் பார்த்தீங்கன்னா it had different forms in the manuscripts as well as in stone inscriptions are a very good example of how it actually evolved to the current form. So printing helped kind of to establish the standard forms. Yeah. So in that sense, yes, printing had a good amount of influence on the script itself, I should say. That's my understanding. And it's not just here with our own script, but it is also same with most of the other scripts around the world. Yeah, so some kind of a standardization happened primarily because of the print medium, I should say. Yeah.
நான் நெல்சன் மாணிக்கம் பிள்ளை அப்படின்ட்டு Nelson Foundry பண்ணது. He was one of the pioneers in the casting the types, அப்படி monotype வரும்போது அதை பற்றி இது எங்கேயுமே மென்ஷன் வரல.
சூளைமேடில் இருக்கிற ப்ரெஸ் தானே சார், நெல்சன் அண்ட் கோ அப்படின்னு ஒரு ப்ரெஸ் இருக்குது. ஸோ அங்கே நான் போயிருக்கேன். ஐ கலெக்டட் த சாம்பிள்ஸ். பட் இங்கே வந்து வி ஆர் மோஸ்ட்லி லுக்கிங், பட் தேர் ஆல் இன் த லேட்டர் பீரியட். இது வந்து வி ஆர் லுக்கிங் அட் சம்திங் பிஃபோர் 18th century அது வரைக்கும். வி ஆர் லுக்கிங் அட் 19th century அது வரைக்கும். ஸோ
இல்லை, இப்போது இந்த ஃபாண்ட் டிசைனில் before he was establishing his own type foundry, Perumal Chetti'la வந்து he was one of the people who was designing the formats. அந்த மாதிரி இங்கே வந்து அந்த ஃபாண்ட் டிசைன் பைனியர்ஸ் வேறு யாராக இருந்தாங்க, ஏதாவது ஐடியா?
ஃபாண்ட் டிசைன் பைனியர்ஸ் அங்கே சார் முன்னாடி உட்காந்துருக்காரு. ஸோ
இது வந்து 20th century லேட்டர் ஹாஃபில் வந்துருது.
ஓகே, நீங்கள் அந்த லெட்டர் ப்ரெஸ் பிரிண்டிங் டைமில் யார் டைப்?
அவர் வந்து 19th centuryலேயே
ஆமாம்,
he was doing in the Perumal Chetti font designs.
Yes.
Even before he found his foundry, அந்த மாதிரி அந்த ஃபார்ம் டிசைன்ஸ்க்கு ஒரு ஹிஸ்ட்ரி ஏதாவது இருக்கா?
ஸோ நான் மோஸ்ட்லி என்னுடைய ரிசர்ச் வந்து இந்த ஏர்லி 20th centuryயோட ஸ்டாப் ஆகிடுச்சு. ஸோ ஐ குட் ஹவ் ஸ்டடிட் ஃபர்தர் பிகாஸ் ஆஃப் டைம் கன்ஸ்ட்ரெயின். அது வந்து என்னுடைய ரிசர்ச்சில் தோ ஐ எம் அவேர், பட் ஐ டிட் நாட் டூ அ டீட்டெயில் ஸ்டடி. அவங்களோட பற்றி நான் ரொம்ப ஆழ்ந்து ரிசர்ச் பண்ணலை, டீப்பாக ரிசர்ச் பண்ணலை. ஸோ மோஸ்ட்லி ஏன்னா இதை நான் வந்து அண்டர்ஸ்டாண்ட் பண்ணி அதை கம்பைல் பண்ணி ஒரு ஸ்ட்ரக்சர் கொண்டு வரதுக்கே டுக் லாட் ஆஃப் டைம் ஃபார் மீ. ஸோ மேபி இன்னும் கொஞ்சம் டைம் ஸ்பெண்ட் பண்ணியிருந்தேன்னா ப்ராபப்லி ஐ வுட் ஹவ் ஏபிள் டு ஸ்டடி அதர் ஸ்காலர்ஸ் அண்ட் pioneers in Tamil printing.
Focus on the PhD was how the forms transformed over a long period of time. So the upper limit was up to early 20th century. So the focus was on how the visual forms evolved over this many. So that is the
correct
focus.
சார், இவர் பேசும்போது ஒரு இன்ட்ரெஸ்டிங் தகவல் சொன்னார். ஆரம்ப பிரிண்டிங்லாம் வந்து ரிலீஜியஸ் டெக்ஸ்டாக இருந்தது, முதல் செக்குலர் டெக்ஸ்டாக திருக்குறள் வந்ததுன்னு. அந்த முதல் செக்குலர் திருக்குறள் இந்த நூலகத்தில் இருக்குது. 1812 பிரிண்ட் பண்ணப்பட்டது. இதை வந்து நாங்கள் வந்து ரீப்ரொடியூஸ் பண்ணியிருக்கோம். ரீப்ரொடியூஸ் பண்ணும்போது இதுக்கு என்ன விலை வைக்கிறதுன்னு ஒன்றும் புரியல. ஏன்னா இது வந்து 1812 புத்தகம், அதை ரீப்ரொடியூஸ் பண்ணுறோம். அப்போ வந்து குறளாக இருக்கிறதுனால ஒரு குறளுக்கு ₹1 அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு 1330 இதுக்கு விலை வச்சுருக்கோம். அதோடைய விலை வந்து நாங்களே முடிவு பண்ணல, விலையை முடிவு பண்ணது வந்து வள்ளுவர். ஆனால் அதோடைய ஐடியா வந்து எல்லாருக்கிட்டும் ஒரு கலெக்ஷன் வச்சுக்கலாம் அப்படின்னு. அதனால் வந்து முற்று எழுத்து பிரிண்டிங்கில் வருவதற்கு முன்னால் இருந்த பிரிண்டிங்கை பற்றி நீங்கள் பார்க்கணுன்னா இந்த கிளாசிக் எடிஷனை நாங்கள் போட்டிருக்கோம், நூலகத்தில் இருக்குது, நீங்கள் எல்லாருமே பார்க்கலாம். அதை நான் அதான் சொல்ல விரும்புகிறேன்.
தேங்க்யூ சார், தேங்க்யூ.
இல்லை, பிடிஎஃப் வெர்ஷன் கிட்டத்தட்ட உலகத்திலே மொத்தம் இது வெறும் ஒரு 5 காப்பி மட்டும்தான் இருக்குது அப்படின்னு இது பண்ணியிருக்காங்க. அதில் ஒரு காப்பி வந்து நம்ம ரோஜா முத்தியா ரிசர்ச் லைப்ரரியில் இருக்குது. கிட்டத்தட்ட பாம்லிப்பில் எப்படி இருக்கோ அதே மாதிரி புள்ளி இல்லாமல் 1812 எப்படி இருக்கோ அதே மாதிரியான புத்தகத்தை அப்படியே வந்து நாங்கள் ப்ரொடியூஸ் பண்ணியிருக்கோம். தேங்க்யூ சார்.
தேங்க்யூ ஸோ மச்.
ரொம்ப முக்கியமான